Hello and welcome to StammerRun with me, John, a husband and father who has covertly stammered for the last 30 years. I try to hide it from the world and now I bring it to you in all of its glory. On StammerRun, we talk about all things to do with stammering. We talk about health, mental fitness, and my obsession with running. So if that sounds appealing to you, then let's get to it. So today, as the thumbnail says, we are going to be talking about how you navigate interviews as a person who stammers or has a speech issue. So I'm going to bring to you today some of the techniques, some of my experiences that I've learnt, and let's walk through it together. One of the things I wanted to highlight first was, irrespective of how an interview goes, you are still you. You know, my experiences have always been that whenever an interview has gone bad, and because I always kept it to myself, you know, after an interview, if it went wrong, and a lot of the time it did, you know, I would feel absolutely awful and didn't share how I felt with everybody. But I just want you to know, irrespective of how the interview goes, you are still you are still awesome, you're still fantastic. So you've decided to get a job, and one of the things for me that was the most terrifying thing, even going as back as when I was 15, 16, back in the day when you could leave school at 15, 16, the thought of going into work. So the stammer that I had absolutely terrified me completely, and the thought of going into work just absolutely just terrified me. So one of my fears, or one of my inane fears, was actually applying for a job and getting an interview. How was I going to navigate an interview? How was I going to speak? You know, what were they going to think about me as a person? One of the core fundamentals that I guess stopped me was fear of what other people thought. Now, unless you give people the opportunity, you know, you're never going to be able to get rid of your fears. So what did I do? So before you interview and you're deciding on a job, on a role, and something that you want to do, I think there are two main things for me and my personal experiences. Number one, absolutely, if you have a stammer or any impact on your speech, you are just as good as everybody else. There's nothing wrong with you. You may just talk in a slightly different way. So it doesn't impact who you are, doesn't impact your skills, and you're just as good as anybody else. I'm on the school of thought now, and I wasn't always this way. I was more so to the latter of, I would only ever go for jobs that I thought that I could do, not necessarily jobs that I wanted to do. Now, the problem with that is that you end up down a career path that you may not want to achieve because of fear. Or do you just throw caution to the wind and say, do you know what, I'm going to do the chosen path, and you head down that career choice? Now, both paths are okay, and I think you need to do what suits you as a person, but I'm of an opinion now, with hindsight and experience, that I don't think anything should hold you back. So I think you should definitely follow your dreams, no matter how difficult that it is. So fantastic. So you've got the interview, and you know, you're looking forward to the interview. Now, how should you feel? You know, how do you feel with an interview? So it's perfectly natural to feel a bag of nerves. You know, even if you don't stammer, you know, I know friends and my other half, they've interviewed, and when you really care about something, you are nervous. So picture that into the frame, and you also then add on to that, you have a stammer. So stammerers, and I know this, is super conscious of how we talk, super conscious of how we come across. So it's perfectly normal to feel stressed. And you know, I've experienced in the past, and I'm ashamed to admit this, but there have been times in the past where I would have an interview or may arrange 2 or 3, and the first or second interview has caused me so much stress to the point where I then just don't go to the third one or the second one. Sometimes I haven't even been to the first one. So this is early days where you feel so stressed that you just feel like you can't go through and you may miss out on an opportunity. So it's perfectly natural to feel stressed. So how do we combat that stress and that anxiety of going to an interview? So the first thing that we can do is within our control. So something that really helped me and still helps me to this day as a person who tries to convince you that I don't have a stammer is I need to be prepared as much as possible. So one of the things over the years that I learned that helped me is to prepare. So, you are going to be asked questions. In the UK, we use agencies. Now, typically what happens with these is that they will give you a set of questions that an employer will potentially ask you. And there's a set of circumstances which companies kind of tend to ask you. So the best thing to do is to be prepared. So if there are particular words, for example, where you may stammer, you could prepare a set of answers that you're comfortable with. So what I used to do is I used to have almost a cheat sheet of questions, a cheat sheet of answers, and prepare and then just insert for the company. So a lot of companies will ask you the same sorts of questions, and for example, questions will be, what do you know about the company? Why do you want to work here? What are your strengths, weaknesses, and we can come to those. And, just a little bit about your experience, so get familiar with your CV. One of the things that really used to help me was talking into a mirror, just to practice, just to get used to hearing myself speak and seeing my words and seeing myself speak, and then be able to kind of maybe potentially see what the employer would actually see themselves. So practice speaking, practice the words, practice and more practice, and that will generally help with confidence and generally help you with the anxiety of the actual interview stage. So the caveat to that is, you've got an interview. Do you tell the potential employer that you have a stammer, or do you not? And I think there are arguments for and against each one. It depends how comfortable you are. So using myself as experience, I wish I'd have probably been more honest and open about having a stammer, because it probably would have made the experience better for me. I would have been less anxious. I think it would have given the employer or the interviewers more of an opportunity to kind of see who you are and maybe, inform them and give them an opportunity to make a decision, a more rounded decision based upon everything that they see and hear. So telling an employer that you have a stammer, even before you see them when you apply for the job, you should. And if you do get an interview, and I stress this, employers should not discriminate against you having a stammer. If, for example, you get an interview and you've told them that you have a stammer, you automatically know that that employer is definitely worth your time, but they've considered that as a factor and you're going to get an interview. So already you are a stage ahead, because what an employer should do is he should make allowances for the circumstances. And, as I've said, it's already nervous time when you interview, and nerves are expected, but informing an employer about having a stammer, they won't just jump to that conclusion of nerves. And irrespective of that, they should allow more time for your interview. So you've applied for a job, you've got the interview, and you've prepared. Now you have to actually go through with the interview. And as we said before, you know, interviews are nerve-wracking for everybody. So it's not just for people who have a stammer, it is nerve-wracking for every single person. Now, how do you prepare for physically, mentally and emotionally when you have a stammer for an interview? So the best thing to do is the night before is rest, try and sleep. I know I've had many sleepless nights, just stressing about an interview. Now try and get some sleep. It's really key that the next day you eat, you try to relax as much as possible, because don't forget, an interviewer is as nervous in some respects as you, as being on the other side of the table and interviewing people. Sometimes you can be as much of a bag of nerves as them, because a lot of times interviewers is not what they do. They are just people who have a job and they've been asked to interview you. So they're not skilled interviewers. They're not skilled people in, you know, interviewing lots and lots of people. That's not, you know, they've been asked to interview you. So they may not feel comfortable with that as well. So it works on both sides. So, you know, definitely eat before, you know, definitely turn up with plenty of time. And then I would mentally prepare myself for the interview. So how do you mentally prepare yourself for the interview? So know where the place is, because the last thing you want to do is be flustered. One of the things for me was, if I was flustered, I absolutely would know it would set the interview off on a bad foot, and sometimes I would never recover. So the best thing to do is know where the interview is. If it's an office, if it's, just know how to get there, you know, get there within a good time. You know, if you can get there a little bit early, maybe go grab a coffee, a tea, and just sit down and breathe and just relax. You know, they've interviewed, particularly if they know you have a stammer, just relax, take your time, you know, and just breathe. You know, just calm down. You know, you're there because of you, and I want you to remember and understand that you are there because they want you to be there. You know, the stammer will not define you. It can be cumbersome and awkward at times, but you know, you are there because they want you to be there. So they want you for your skills, they want you for your skill set. So it's now your time to shine. You go into a building for the first time. This is when I would know that how I would do in an interview before I'd even sit down. So you'd go into the reception, the foyer, as we say here, and you may have security. So now you need to go through security. So they're going to ask you your name, they're going to ask you who you're here to see. And if you're calm, collected, then you should be able to breeze through that. And as soon as you're through there, the next one may be an elevator up, and you may need to go through another reception. So again, the same thing. And then it's the dreaded sitting around waiting for that interview. So you're sat there in an office or a row of chairs, and you're waiting for the interviewer to come. And in some respects, so this is kind of where the worst part is for me. It's like waiting on a ride at a fair, and you're going up and up and up and up. And, you know, sometimes you can feel your heart pumping out of your chest. All these things are going through your mind. Your mind may be scrambled at this point. You know, you're forgetting your answers. You know, you may just be in a panic. This is perfectly normal. This happens to everybody. You know, it's not just you, it's happened to me, it's happened to so many people that you're so eager, and it's because you care. And at this point, you are still you. This is nothing to do with having a stammer. This is just perfectly normal. All you want to do is run and escape. It's the fight or the flight mode, but you have a stammer, you are a fighter, and you will easily get through this bit. So you sat there, just breathe, you know why you're there. You've told them you have a stammer. There's nothing to fear. So the next part is they come out, and you know the best thing to do is, as much as possible, is just smile. It's just seem positive, smile, and just really try and enjoy the experience. And one of the things that I did early on with interviews, maybe not some of the first 5 or 6 of them, you know, because I just didn't know how to handle it. I didn't have that experience. And I used all that as a learning experience. Now, if the interview doesn't go well from your perspective, then again, it doesn't define who you are. You know, we all have bad days. You know, nobody's. Sometimes you could be vying for the same job as another 6 or 7 people. It doesn't always mean that your stammer will stop you from getting the job. So that's the first thing, is that the disappointment of not being successful in a job was something I always initially found it hard to accept, and I always blamed the stammer because that was the easy thing to do. Sometimes it could be because of the stammer, and if it is, then you know, then the employer is not worth your time, because they've got to want you, but equally, just as important, you've got to want them. This is an interview is a two-way street. You've got to want the employer as much as the employer wants the employee. So the ball is not always in their court. Yes, you are going there for a job, but if you don't feel that it's right, you are not obligated to take that job. So it's up to an employer to convince you to take the job as much as you need to convince them to employ you. So how do you deal with the fallout after the interview? Now, immediately after the interview, I always felt relieved. You know, I always had that rush of relief, happiness, not because I think I'd got the job or because I think I'd done, you know, badly, purely because I achieved something and I went to an interview. And that's what I really want you to really take from this, is that as much as it is a nervous time and an anxious time to interview anyway, when you add a layer on top of that of anxiety, you know, you're fearful of speaking, which is a massive deal. This is the primary form of communication. And you take that fear and you face that fear. Now, how amazing are you to go and do something that people take for granted, you think about all of the time, and you interview? You know, that in itself is amazing, and you should be deeply proud that you've gone and interviewed and did something. You faced your fear and you did that. So with that said, if you do have an interview coming up, I'd love to know how you do. You know, if there's any tips that you want to give the community, any tips you want to get. You know, I've interviewed lots and lots of times, so happy to share my thoughts and opinions on my experience. Doesn't make me an expert on it, but I can share some of the good and the bad points where I've interviewed in the past. And on that note, please don't forget to turn on your notifications to know when a new video drops. Also, please don't forget to like, favorite and subscribe. You know, it's a lot to the channel. thank you so much for subscribing. Thank you so much for being here. And please take care. And I'll see you on the next one. Take care.